Of all the cases I've ever put in front of you, this is the one that still gets under my skin. A missing flight attendant, a bright, beautiful Danish woman who flew for Pan Am, walked into her own home one winter night and was never seen alive again. A dead-eyed suspect, so cold that when the questions started coming about the missing woman, he sat right down, took a lie detector test, and passed it clean, without so much as a flinch. A wood chipper, rented, roaring away on the bank of a frozen river at 3:30 in the morning, in the teeth of a raging blizzard. One figure standing beside it in the dark, feeding something into the blades. And one of the most extraordinary forensic investigations ever attempted, because what was left of this woman, you could damn near hold in the palm of your hand. Stick with me all the way to the end, and I'll show you exactly how they built a murder case out of almost nothing, and just how close the killer came to walking away clean. This is the murder of Helle Crafts. Western Connecticut, November 1986. It's somewhere around 3:30 in the morning, and the Housatonic River Valley is getting absolutely worked over by a nor'easter. We're talking sleet coming in sideways off the hills, wind that'll find every gap in your jacket, the kind of night where the trees are bending and the road is disappearing under an inch of new ice every hour. Nobody's out in this. Except Joseph Hine. He's a snowplow driver working his route along the river road in Newtown. Out in the sticks, middle of nowhere. No houses nearby. Just the road and the tree line, and the sound of the river below. He's grinding through the storm, headlights barely cutting through the sleet, when something on the riverbank catches his eye. He slows down. There's a man out there, standing alone on the bank of the Housatonic River, in a nor'easter, at 3:30 in the morning, next to a piece of equipment Hine immediately recognizes. It's a wood chipper, a big one, commercial grade. The kind of machine that could eat a tree trunk and spit out mulch in about 4 seconds flat. Engines running full tilt, screaming over the storm. And the man is feeding something into it. Whatever's going in the front is coming out the discharge chute in the spray, straight down into the Housatonic River below, where the current grabs it immediately and pulls it downstream into the dock. Hine watches for a second, figures it's some kind of overnight town crew doing debris cleanup. Weird night for it, but whatever. He keeps plowing. He swings back around on his route, maybe an hour later. Still there. Same guy. Same machine. Still going. Hine notes it and moves on. He's got a route to finish. He has absolutely no idea what he just drove past. Because what that man is feeding into that machine, piece by piece, methodically, in the dock, in the blizzard, over a moving river specifically so the current does the cleanup, isn't yard debris. It's a woman. A 39-year-old mother of 3 who walked through her own front door and was never seen again. And the person standing at the chipper at 3:30 in the morning? We'll get there. All right, welcome back. Pull up a chair and lock in, because this one's been sitting on the shelf for a while, and it deserves the full treatment. And before we get started, there's a decent chance you've already heard a tiny piece of this story without realizing it. The Coen brothers would later cite this case as one of the inspirations behind Fargo's infamous woodchipper scene. Most people remember that movie. It was kick-ass. Almost nobody remembers Helle Crafts. We're gonna fix that today. Newtown, Connecticut. Now, before that name does anything to your brain, pump the brakes. What this town became known for in 2012, that's a completely different chapter of darkness, and it's not what we're here for today. What we're digging into goes way back further than that, and most people outside Connecticut either never heard about it or forgot it completely, which is genuinely criminal in itself, because this case is wicked crazy. Newtown's out in the sticks, by the way, western Fairfield County, about an hour south of Hartford. Picture a classic New England suburb. Colonial homes set back from the road, stone walls, a town green, the whole thing. The kind of place where people move specifically because it's quiet, because nothing's happening there. And in the fall of 1986, something happens there. Here's where the clock starts. It's November 18th, 1986, a Tuesday. A woman named Helle Crafts, 39 years old, Danish-born, flight attendant for Pan Am, lands back in the States after a European flight assignment. Long trip, she's tired. Her best friend drops her off at the family house on Newfield Lane sometime that evening. The kids are home, the nanny has the night off, and isn't due back until midnight. Helle walks through the front door. That's the last confirmed sighting of Helle Crafts by anyone outside that house. Ever. A few days pass, then her flight crew notices she hasn't shown up for her next assignment. No call to scheduling, no word to anyone, nothing. Now look, for a Pan Am flight attendant with years on the job, that's just not usual. That's alarming. These are professionals. You don't just ghost your route. You don't just not show up and not call. It doesn't work that way. Her friends start ringing the house and her husband picks up. He tells them she flew to Denmark. Her mother's sick, he says, that's where she went. One of her friends calls back a few days later, gets him again. New story. Now she's on vacation somewhere with a friend. Just needed to get away. Two completely different answers, same week, same guy. Her divorce attorney, a woman named Diane Anderson, who Helle had been quietly meeting with for months, hears about this and immediately picks up the phone. She calls private detective Keith Mayo, who's also been working quietly on Helle's behalf. The two of them drive down to the Newtown Police Department together and try to file a missing persons report. The Newtown PD looks at them and essentially says, "Not our problem. Lady probably just left," they figured. Happens all the time. Marriages fall apart, people take off. Come back when you got something real. Diane Anderson and Keith Mayo walk out that building with nothing. No case number, no investigation, no urgency whatsoever from the people whose literal job is to find missing people. And somewhere in Newtown, a husband with two contradicting stories and a wife nobody's seen in days goes about his week like everything's completely fine. That's day one. No body, no crime scene, no official investigation. Just a private detective with a bad feeling and a set of credit card statements he's about to start going through very, very carefully. So here's what we need to establish right now, before we go any further into this investigation, because it matters enormously for everything that comes after. Who is Richard Crafts? Because this isn't a crime of passion situation. This isn't a guy who snapped on a bad night and then panicked. The way this thing unfolds, the planning, the execution, the sheer nerve it takes to go about your week afterward, none of it makes sense unless you understand exactly what kind of person you're dealing with from the jump. Richard Crafts is an Eastern Airlines pilot, international routes. He's got the career, he's got the income, he's got the lifestyle that comes with it. And on top of the flying job, and this detail's really gonna matter, he's a part-time police officer in Newtown. Has been for years. He knows how investigations work. He knows how crime scenes get processed. He knows what detectives look for when something goes wrong, and just as importantly, he knows what they tend to stop looking for when there's no body and no obvious crime scene. That knowledge, as it turns out, is central to everything. Now, everyone who knows Richard Crafts personally describes roughly the same thing. This flat, empty, dead-eyed stare that doesn't move regardless of what's happening around him. His own social circle describes their relationship as not close. Colleagues say he was cold, not aggressive, not volatile, just absent. Like the emotional circuitry simply wasn't connected. Friends of Helle's put it more plainly. They say he hit her. And Helle, she's the opposite of this man in every possible way. She's warm, she's present, she's the kind of person that her entire Pan Am flight crew gravitates towards. Danish-born, came over, built a life here, had 3 kids. By every account, she's a devoted, loving mother who is deeply embedded in the lives of those children. By 1986, after 12 years of marriage to Richard Crafts, she's had enough. The lying about where he's been, the affair she strongly suspects but hasn't been able to confirm yet. She makes 2 moves. First, she sits down with a divorce attorney in Newtown named Diane Anderson. Second, and this is where it gets operational, she hires a private detective named Keith Mayo. She gives Mayo a lead right away. There's a long-distance number showing up repeatedly on the husband's phone bills that she doesn't recognize. Mayo works it, tracks Richard to a flight attendant named Nancy Dodd, gets eyes on them, gets photos. The 2 of them together, kissing, holding hands, the whole nasty thing. And then Mayo sits across from Helle Crafts in a restaurant parking lot and lays the photos out in front of her. She cries for 10 straight minutes. But here's the detail that shifts the whole story into a darker gear. Before any of this formally moves forward, before a single divorce paper gets filed, before Richard Crafts has any official legal reason to feel cornered, Helle pulls a friend from her flight crew aside and says, directly, clearly, looking her in the eye, "If anything ever happens to me, don't think it was an accident." All I gotta say is holy shit. Then she says a version of this to multiple people. Her flight crew, her attorney Diane Anderson, who later describes it as an unusual thing to hear from a client. This woman's not casually venting about a bad marriage. She's scared. Specifically, deliberately scared. Scared enough to start leaving a verbal paper trail with the people around her. The kind of scared where some part of you is thinking, if something happens, I want someone to know where to look. Now, Richard Crafts knows the divorce is coming. He knows Mayo has been tailing him. He knows Helle has documentation. He knows she's been talking to a lawyer. And on the night of November 18th, 1986, Helle walks through the front door of that house on Newfield Lane, and as we said before, nobody outside those walls ever sees her again. Get this. Within days of Helle vanishing, the live-in nanny starts noticing things around the house that don't add up. A dark stain on the carpet near the master bedroom door that wasn't there before. New carpet getting ripped up by Richard with zero explanation given. And then, the nanny notices something else missing entirely from the garage. A large chest freezer. Gone. I got one of those. They're fucking heavy. How does one man get rid of that thing? How's that just go missing? Mind you, this is the same garage where, according to the credit card records that Keith Mayo is now getting his hands on, Richard Crafts has recently rented something else entirely. A commercial wood chipper on his own credit card with his own name on the receipt. A stupid move so staggering, so breathtakingly avoidable that when investigators eventually see it, they can barely believe what they're looking at. But before we get into what Mayo does with that receipt, and before the Connecticut State Police get pulled into this thing, we need to properly understand who Helle Crafts actually was. Because honestly, she deserves more than a paragraph. And the town she lived in, the world she moved through, tells you everything about why this case hits the way it does. Helle Nielsen was born in Denmark in 1947. And if you're going to understand why this case lands the way it does, you have to start there. Not with the crime, not with the evidence, but with her. Because Helle Crafts is not a supporting character in her own story, and she's not going to get treated like one here. She grew up in Copenhagen, came to the States as a young woman, and built a life that was genuinely hers. She got into aviation and became a flight attendant for Pan Am, at a time when that job still carried a real sense of glamour and adventure. International routes, European layovers, a world bigger than Newtown, Connecticut. By the accounts of everyone who flew with her, Helle was warm, funny, steady, and deeply loved by the people around her. She was also, by every account, an extraordinary mother. 3 kids, all young in 1986. Whatever was going wrong inside that marriage, Helle showed up completely for those children. The idea that she would voluntarily walk away from them, vanish with no note, no call, no goodbye, is something everyone in her life immediately rejects. The Crafts house looked perfect on paper. Airline pilot husband, flight attendant wife, nice house, 3 kids, live-in nanny, but Helle's friends knew better. There's one letter in particular, written to her mother back in Denmark, that investigators would later reference. In it, Helle writes plainly that she's told Richard she wants a divorce, that she no longer trusts him, that something in the marriage has broken beyond fixing. The abuse allegations, documented through friends and statements rather than police reports, paint a picture of a marriage that had curdled badly long before 1986. Friends say Richard hit her. Helle never formally reported it, but she talked about it to people close to her. And again, she told them that if anything happened to her, they shouldn't assume it was an accident. That's not venting. That's a woman who understands the danger she's in. She hired the detective, she hired the attorney, she warned the people around her. She did everything right. And on the night of November 18th, 1986, tired from that transatlantic flight, dropped off at home by her best friend, kids in bed, nanny out for the night, she walked into that house and ran out of road. The crazy thing is, there's a window of time where this whole thing almost disappears completely, because the first people who should have caught this didn't. Alright, here's what we know and here's what we don't. And the line between those two things is important, so we're going to be straight about that. That November 18th, 1986, Tuesday evening, Helle Crafts lands back in the States after that flight from Europe. It's been a long trip, the kind of day that leaves you wrung out and ready to be home. She gets dropped off, goes inside, the kids are there. She puts them to bed around 8 o'clock. The family's live-in nanny, Marie Thomas, has the night off and isn't expected back until around midnight. So from roughly 8 o'clock onward, it's just Helle in the house. Based on what investigators later pieced together, Helle changes out of her travel clothes and into her favorite nightshirt, a bluish-green cotton nightshirt she wears a lot. She goes through her mail, stuffing some of it in the pocket of her nightshirt, and begins changing the sheets on the bed. And then something happens in that bedroom. What exactly happens, nobody knows. There's no witnesses, no recording, no confession. The final conversation inside that room died with the people who were there. What investigators eventually determine, however, is that something violent occurred inside that house and that Helle Crafts never walked back out. Now here's where the reconstruction begins. Investigators believe Helle was attacked inside the master bedroom. No murder weapon was ever conclusively identified, and the precise sequence of events remains unknown. What is known is that sometime after Helle disappeared, people close to the family began noticing things around the house that didn't make sense. The nanny noticed that dark stain near the master bedroom, and she noticed carpeting that had been removed and replaced, and she noticed that other thing, the large chest freezer, gone. Credit card records would later show Richard Crafts renting a U-Haul truck shortly after Helle's disappearance. They would also show him renting a Brush Bandit Model 100 woodchipper on his own credit card. His own credit card. Think about that for a second. This is a man who supposedly understands investigations, a man who works in law enforcement, a man who clearly spent time thinking about how evidence gets found, and then he rents the single most incriminating piece of equipment in the entire case using his own name and his own Visa card? At some point after Helle's disappearance, whether that night or after the body had been frozen in the chest freezer, investigators believe Richard Crafts loaded the remains, along with other materials connected to the crime, into the U-Haul and drove to River Road in Newtown. And Joseph Hine saw him. 3:30 in the morning, a nor'easter brewing across the river valley. A man standing beside a commercial woodchipper, feeding material into the machine while the discharge sprayed directly into the river below. The live-in nanny, Marie Thomas, arrives home around 2 in the morning and goes to bed. She notices nothing unusual. By daylight, Richard has taken the children and the nanny to his sister's house. He tells them Helle left early that morning. Then he goes back to clean up. The stained carpet disappears, the freezer's gone, the woodchipper's returned, and Richard Crafts waits. For a brief period of time, it looks like the plan might actually work. But private investigator Keith Mayo is already digging through the paperwork, and one credit card receipt is about to trigger a chain reaction that Richard Crafts never sees coming. So here's where the investigation hits its first real wall. Private investigator Keith Mayo is working his own case at this point. Remember, the Newtown PD has essentially told him and Helle's divorce attorney Diane Anderson to come back when they've got something real. And what Mayo keeps hearing from everyone in Helle's life is the same thing. She would never leave those kids. Not voluntarily. Whatever Richard Crafts is telling people about Denmark or a vacation, nobody who actually knew Helle believes it. But here's the problem. Belief isn't evidence. A husband telling conflicting stories is suspicious, but it ain't a crime. And without physical proof that something happened to Helle inside that house, there is no case. There's just a missing woman and a husband who says she left. Then Richard Crafts does something that genuinely complicates the investigation. He agrees to take a polygraph test. He sits down, answers the questions, denies killing his wife, denies knowing where she is, and denies hiring anyone to harm her. And what the examiners conclude? He's telling the truth. Now you got a missing woman, an incredibly suspicious husband, and a polygraph result that appears to clear him. The Newtown PD, already leaning toward the idea that Helle simply left, feels even less urgency to treat this as a criminal investigation. Meanwhile, Richard Crafts keeps moving through his life as though nothing happened. He goes to work, takes care of the kids, maintaining the story that Helle left voluntarily. The PI keeps pushing, the lawyer keeps pushing, and eventually private investigator Mayo gets what he's been looking for: the credit card records, the wood chipper rental, a chainsaw purchase. Individually, none of those things prove murder. Together, they get someone's attention. Mayo brings the records to the Connecticut State Police, and this is the moment the investigation changes direction. The Staties look at those purchases and make a call. They call forensics expert Dr. Henry Lee. Up to this point, the investigation had been trapped by one assumption: no body, no case. What happens next is an attempt to prove the opposite, because before Dr. Lee's team ever reaches the riverbank, they start somewhere much smaller, a bedroom. And what Henry Lee finds there is the moment this stops being a missing persons case and starts becoming a murder investigation. All right, stop, just for a second. Because before we go any further into the forensics work, I need you to feel where this investigation is sitting right now. Not the facts, you've got the facts. I mean the actual position investigators are in. They believe something happened to Helle Crafts. Her friends believe it, her attorney believes it, Keith Mayo has believed it since the beginning. And now the Connecticut State Police believe it too, which is why forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee is involved. It is why this case finally has real investigative firepower pointed at it. But belief is not proof. And right now, the proof is a problem. There's no body. Whatever went into that wood chipper was sprayed into a moving river during a nor'easter, and the Housatonic has been carrying the evidence away ever since. And on top of that, Richard Crafts passed a polygraph. So this is a nightmare version of a murder investigation. They have suspicion, they have a timeline, they have a deeply suspicious husband, they have a receipt that looks terrible, they have a snowplow driver who saw something strange in the dark, but they do not yet have Helle. Now, here's what I need you to hold on to. Dr. Henry Lee is about to walk into that bedroom with a chemical test and a forensic mindset that operates on a completely different level than anything this investigation has seen so far. And what he finds in that room, on a mattress that looks clean to the naked eye, becomes the first thread that starts pulling this whole thing apart. Because it turns out you can scrub a crime scene, you can rip up carpet, you can wash towels, you can run a body through a wood chipper into a river in a blizzard, but you cannot scrub away what you don't know is still there. And Richard Crafts didn't know. And that's where we're headed. A mattress, a riverbank, a chainsaw, a single tooth recovered from a pail of freezing water. Look, do me a favor. If you're this deep into the case and you're not subscribed yet, fix that right now. One click, that's it. No fluff, no algorithm begging, just cases done right. Start to finish, no filler. Hit it, then we're gonna get right back into the evidence, because what comes next is worth staying for. Forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee gets the call and comes in to examine the Crafts house on Newfield Lane. The first place he goes is the master bedroom. He applies a chemical test to the mattress. 5 spots turn blue, tiny, barely visible, the kind of thing you'd walk past 1,000 times and never notice. But they're there. The blood is human, recent, and type O positive. Helle Crafts' blood type. The towels in the bathroom tell a similar story. They've been washed, but testing shows they've been saturated with blood. Bottom line from the bedroom examination, something violent happened in that room. A person bled a ton, and whoever cleaned it up knew enough to try, but not enough to succeed. That's the bedroom. Now the investigation moves down to the river. Dr. Lee assembles a forensics team and sends them to River Road, the location where snowplow driver Joseph Hine saw the wood chipper operating. They search through the mud, the leaves, wood chips, and river debris. What they find is extraordinary. They recover thousands of hairs from the riverbank. Many show cutting patterns consistent with a mechanical blade. The hairs are compared to Helle's hairbrush and found to be microscopically consistent with her hair. Then they find a fingernail, bright red nail polish still attached. A forensic chemist compares it against a bottle of nail polish recovered from Helle's bedroom. The chemical makeup matches, of course. Dr. Lee knows they need more. The team begins recovering bone fragments, tiny pieces mixed among the wood chips and debris. A controlled test using the same type of wood chipper demonstrates a distinctive cutting signature. The fragments from the river show the same pattern. More importantly, they're identified as human skull fragments. What the record establishes is straightforward. A human being's skull went through that wood chipper. Blood type performed on the fragments produces the same results investigators have been seeing throughout the case. Type O positive. Again. Now, they need to close the identity question completely. Forensic odontologist, fancy word for dentist, Dr. Lowell Levine spends 5 days searching the riverbank. Day 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing. On the 5th day, however, after hours in the freezing water, he returns to the search tent, sets down his evidence pail, and notices something sitting at the bottom. A tooth. A single human tooth recovered from the search area. Dr. Levine compares it to Helle Crafts' dental records. The match is exact. He has no doubt. The tooth came from Helle Crafts. At this point, investigators aren't just finding biological evidence, they're finding equipment. Pieces of a chainsaw begin turning up among the debris recovered from the river. Someone tried to destroy it before throwing it away. The serial number had been scratched off. The saw had been disassembled. But the Connecticut State Police sent it for examination anyway. And that's when the chainsaw starts talking too. Richard Crafts had scratched the serial number off before throwing the pieces into the river. But investigators recovered the chainsaw parts and discovered human hair, human tissue, and bluish-green cotton fibers consistent with Helle's favorite nightshirt from the chainsaw parts. Then they restore the damaged serial number. The number leads straight back to a warranty card, submitted by, you guessed it, Richard B. Crafts. Bottom line is this: the forensics chain is complete. Every link connects. Every piece of physical evidence recovered from that frozen Connecticut riverbank points in the same direction. And Richard Crafts is about to find out that scratching a serial number off a chainsaw and throwing it into the river isn't quite the clean getaway he thought it was. See you later, pal. Before we walk into that courtroom, every major case attracts a group of people who look at the evidence and ask the same question. What if everybody got it wrong? The Crafts case is no exception. And to be fair, there are legitimate questions here. The snowplow driver's identification is limited. The polygraph result is unusual. And microscopic hair comparison, as a practice in 1986, has since come under significant scrutiny. Those are real issues. But then there's the far more aggressive theory, the idea that Helle Crafts staged her own disappearance. The theory is simple. Helle left voluntarily, and the forensic evidence is either flawed, contaminated, misunderstood, or the product of investigative tunnel vision. All right, let's deal with this. First, a polygraph isn't proof of innocence. It never was. Richard Crafts passing a polygraph proves only that he passed a polygraph. Second, the theory requires Helle Crafts to do something every person who knew her considered unthinkable. Leave her children, without a word, without even contacting them. And third, the theory collapses under the weight of the evidence. Not one piece of evidence, all of it. The blood in the bedroom, the tooth, the bone fragments, the chainsaw, the dental records, the wood chip of the U-Haul. Could one piece be wrong? Maybe. Could all of it be wrong at the same time? That's where the theory falls apart. Now, one criticism is absolutely fair. The hair evidence would be treated differently today. Microscopic hair comparison isn't viewed with the same confidence it was in 1986. But the hair evidence isn't carrying the case by itself. It's one strand in a much larger forensic chain. And that distinction matters, because in a second, a jury's going to hear that entire chain laid out piece by piece, and they're going to be asked one simple question. Does all of this point in the same direction? Richard Crafts is arrested in January 1987, roughly 2 months after Helle's disappearance, and charged with murder. The case becomes front-page news almost immediately. A pilot, a wood chipper, a nor'easter, a forensics team sifting a frozen riverbank for human remains. The details are so unusual that the story spreads far beyond Connecticut. But the prosecution still has a problem. There's no complete body. Richard Crafts pleads not guilty, and his defense centers on the most obvious argument available. The state is attempting to convict a man of murder without ever recovering a victim in the traditional sense. The defense argues that the case is built on fragments, trace evidence, and forensic interpretation. The first trial begins in 1988 in New London, Connecticut, and it goes badly for the prosecution. Not because the evidence falls apart, not because the witnesses fail, the jury simply can't reach a verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury deadlocks. Hung jury, mistrial. For Christ's sake. The prosecution has to start over, new jury, new venue. The retrial moves to Norwalk, Connecticut. The second trial begins in 1989. This time, the jury reaches a decision. They deliberate. They return. Guilty. Richard Crafts is convicted of the murder of Helle Crafts. The conviction becomes a landmark moment in Connecticut legal history. A murder case built largely from forensic fragments without a complete body ever being recovered. Richard Crafts receives a 50-year prison sentence. Over the years, his attorney files multiple appeals challenging different aspects of the conviction. None of them succeed. The conviction stands. Bottom line on the legal battle is this. The case goes to trial twice. One jury can't decide. The second one can. A man who believed he had eliminated every meaningful piece of evidence still ends up convicted because investigators were willing to build a case from fragments most people would have considered impossible to use. That's the margin. That's how close this case comes to never being solved. Which brings us to where things stand now. The trial ends, the verdict comes in, the headlines run for a few more days, and then the news cycle moves on to the next thing, the way it always does. And Newfield Lane goes quiet. The house is still there. The Housatonic River is still there. Still moving, still cold in November, the way it's always been cold in November. Newtown goes back to being Newtown. The town green, the stone walls, the colonial houses set back from the road. Life resumes. Seasons pass. Kids grow up. People who follow the trial from their living rooms get older and eventually stop talking about it at the dinner table. 34 years goes by. And then in 2020, quietly, without much fanfare from the state, Richard Crafts is released from prison and placed under parole supervision. 82 years old, 30 years served, out. The public reaction in Connecticut is not quiet. The people who had been following this case since 1986, people who sat through both trials, people who remembered Helle, they're furious. Not surprised maybe, but furious. Because 30 years for what he did to her? The planning, the freezer, the chainsaw, the chipper, the river, the blizzard, all of it. 30 years feels like a number that doesn't come close to fitting the crime. He walks out anyway. As of this recording, Richard Crafts is a free man, 80-something years old, somewhere in Connecticut. That's the scoreboard. Fade to black. All right, first off, thanks for hanging out with me. If you're into deep dives like this, hit subscribe. I've got a whole pile of cases waiting their turn, and some of them are every bit as bizarre as this one. And if you got something out of this video, hit the like button too. Apparently that's how we convince the YouTube machine that a guy talking about wood chippers and bad decisions deserves to exist. Either way, I appreciate you being here. I'll see you next time, kid.